At the turn of the millennium, if you wanted to buy a serious estate bottled wine actually made on Mount Etna, here's how many wineries you had to choose from. 4. Not 4 notable ones, not 4 worth seeking out. 4, period. That was the entire commercial wine industry on one of the oldest continuously cultivated wine mountains in Italy. This is a mountain where the Greeks planted vines 2,700 years ago, where wine survived Roman taxation, Byzantine silk monopolies, an Islamic ban on alcohol, earthquakes, tsunamis, and a plague that wiped out nearly every other vineyard in Europe. And by the year 2000, it had been reduced to 4. How does a mountain with that much history end up here? This is a story of how a railway, a distant government, and a piece of European legislation nearly finished off what plague and conquest never could, and how, against fairly steep odds, this mountain talked its way back from the brink. On New Year's Eve 1883, 17 communities on the slopes of Mount Etna drafted a plan for the Ferrovia Circumetnea, a railway that would circle the entire mountain, connecting its wine-producing villages directly to markets and ports. In March 1895, the first trains started running. Passo Picciato, on the northern slope, became the stop with the greatest concentration of wineries within walking and cycling distance. Practically overnight, a village became a wine hub. The railway transformed the economics of Etna wine, cutting transport costs and making small-scale commercial winemaking viable in a way it simply hadn't been before. For a moment, it looked like nothing but growth ahead. But not everything from this period was good news. In 1860, right as that year's harvest began, Sicily was annexed by the House of Savoy in the Kingdom of Sardinia. The following year, Italy was unified, and by 1862, administrators from Turin and Rome were confiscating land across Sicily and seizing whatever riches turned up in abandoned properties. Sicilians were taxed wherever the new government could find a way to tax them. Every young man on the island was drafted into the new Italian army. This is, in more than a small way, the origin of a wariness Sicilians still feel towards the mainland Italian state today. A relationship that started with extraction, not investment. For Etna's wine producers specifically, unification meant new taxes and conscripted labor, not roads, railways, or support. Then, in the early 1920s, another blow landed. The Italian government imposed taxes specifically on wine. The market contracted. Production fell. The railway had connected the mountain to the world. The new nation-state, in almost the same breath, made it harder to actually make a living here. So the 19th century ended with Etna wine caught between opportunity and extraction. The 20th century would make that tension very hard to keep balancing. By the mid-20th century, Etna wine was almost unrecognizable from its 19th century peak. Vineyard area had shrunk dramatically decade after decade, and then, in 1997, came a decision that reshaped everything that was left. The European Union declared the traditional palmento, the ancient stone fermentation facility carved directly into lava rock, where gravity flow winemaking had been practiced for millennia, illegal on hygiene grounds. This wasn't just the end of a winemaking method, it restructured the entire economics of small-scale production on the mountain. Growers who had previously made and sold their own finished wine now had no legal way to keep doing it. Their only remaining option was to sell their grapes to someone else's winery instead, which meant lower income and a broken connection to the very product their families had been making for generations, in some cases, since before there was a written Italian language to describe it. The Etna DOC, established back in 1968, actually shrank between 1990 and 2000, down to just 3,000 hectares, of which only 15% carried official denomination of origin status. In the late 1990s, nobody in the Sicilian wine industry believed this mountain had a future. People in the trade openly described Etna as the unluckiest and most horrible place in Sicily to try to make wine. International buyers were indifferent. The mountain was regarded less as a wine region and more as a geological hazard that happened to have some vines on it. By the turn of the millennium, there were reportedly only 4 commercial wineries left bottling estate wine on the entire mountain. That's the number we opened with. And by any reasonable measure, this should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. Because right around the point where everyone else had given up on this mountain, 2 people hadn't. It began with one man, Dr. Giuseppe Benante, a pharmacist from Via Grande who established his eponymous estate in 1988 and started making serious, ambitious wine from Etna's own local grapes at a moment when almost nobody else on the mountain was bothering to try. Benanti bet everything on 2 varieties that had been treated for decades as rustic and unfashionable: Carricante for white wine, Nerello Mascalese for red. He proved that grapes grown on volcanic soil at real altitude could produce wines with genuine complexity, wines that could actually age. He was followed in 2002 by Marco de Grazia, an American exporter of Italian wine who founded Tenuta delle Terre Nere. De Grazia made one decision that ended up reshaping how the entire region would be understood from that point forward. Instead of blending fruit from across his property into one wine, he vinified individual vineyard sites completely separately. His argument was that Etna could only be properly understood through its internal differences, that this mountain wasn't one terroir, it was hundreds. De Grazia introduced the Contrada, the named vineyard area, as the lens through which Etna wine should be read, and it stuck. The Contrada is now the organizing principle of the entire region's wine culture. There are 133 of them officially recognized within the DOC, each one a named geographic area rooted in historical usage, each defined by its position on the mountain, its sun exposure, elevation, and the specific lava flow it happens to sit on. And once you start looking at Etna through the Contrada system, a clear geographic identity emerges, one split cleanly into 3. The northern slope, clustered around Randazzo and Castiglione di Sicilia, is considered Etna's qualitative core, sometimes called the Côte de Nuit of the volcano. Facing north is, in the heat of Sicily, actually an advantage. It allows for a slow, long ripening season. Wines from the north tend to be the most structured, savory, and age-worthy on the mountain. This is where you'll find the most celebrated Contrade and the highest concentration of serious producers. The eastern slope faces the Ionian Sea and gets more rainfall than anywhere else on the mountain. Red grapes struggle here, but Carricante thrives, reaching its highest expression in the cooler, wetter conditions around the village of Milo, the only place on Etna allowed to produce Etna Bianco Superiore. The south is warmer and sunnier, historically the peasant heartland of the region, and for a long time, its wines were considered the least prestigious of the 3. That's changing. Producers are now deliberately climbing higher up the southern slope to escape the heat, making wines that combine the ripe, explosive fruit of southern sun exposure with the tension and precision that comes from high-altitude vineyards. So that is how ruin became Renaissance, a railway that opened the mountain up, followed by a new nation that taxed it back down, a legal ban that ended centuries of traditional winemaking almost overnight, a collapse so severe that this mountain was down to 4 wineries and a reputation as the unluckiest place in Sicily. And then, 2 people who refused to accept that verdict, one who proved the grapes deserved to be taken seriously, and the other who proved the mountain itself deserved to be read like a map, Contrada by Contrada, instead of one single blur of volcanic soil. Today, Etna is one of the most talked about wine regions in the world. But talking about the mountain, the empires, the collapse, and the comeback only gets you so far. To really understand what makes this place unique, we have to talk about what's actually in the glass. The grape themselves, the way they're made, and the wines that this mountain has spent 2,700 years learning how to produce.